Hello, dear friends, and welcome. This is a new installment about Lloyd. Before we begin, I'd like to thank everyone for their support. Enjoy the show. Lloyd's mother sat alone in an empty room, gazing out the window. The protagonist's father immediately approached his wife, gently took her hand, and suggested that she must be very frightened. To be truthful, the main hero's father was just as scared, because the impending invasion of the King of Hell was a terrible thing. A short time ago, the moment Lloyd had burst into their room, he had shouted from the doorway that the King of Hell was about to invade their lands. The protagonist then explained that he couldn't elaborate as there was very little time. Lloyd asked for their permission for certain actions, namely to alter the lake's course in such a way as to flood specific territories. The protagonist's father was worried, as everything Lloyd had built with such difficulty would be lost. But the hero firmly stated that he simply had no other choice. He explained that, for the sake of victory, he was already making the lake's water holy, which would be able to significantly weaken the powerful army of hell. His parents were worried, suspecting that this event might also be connected to the phenomenon of fate restoration. Lloyd believed that this was most likely the case. The hero's father couldn't understand what the King of Hell wanted so badly that he was willing to personally invade the human world. Lloyd looked at his parents with an empty, expressionless gaze, after which he told them something that shocked them incredibly. His father sincerely believed that the main hero would tell them everything when the time was right, and the protagonist himself felt terrible that he couldn't tell them everything right now. His mother confessed that she was incredibly scared. She said that the young man was like a son to them, and she was very worried about him. His father, however, was convinced that the Lloyd they knew would never lose, not even to the King of Hell himself. A short time later, in the forge, a mighty man wiped the sweat from his brow after a hard day's work. He immediately cast his gaze aside, where a majestic dragon statue stood. Lloyd walked inside, marveling at the work done. Examining this true masterpiece of art, he believed that this time Solitas had outdone himself. The man explained that for a very long time, he had felt as if he had stopped developing his skills. Then, with a smile on his face, he confessed that thanks to Lloyd, he had managed to make such great progress in just a few months. The protagonist replied that, in any case, they had a contract that was beneficial to both sides. He then began to pull out some papers, saying that he had an excellent new proposal. The man read the title of the papers, which was Short-Term Lease Agreement. Lloyd explained that the King of Hell would soon invade this place, and he needed this dwelling for a short time. The man thought the matter was too serious to be smiling so carefree. Lloyd, however, stated that a grim face wouldn't help the situation anyway. The man decided to at least hear the conditions, as he was, at a minimum, indebted to Lloyd for many things. The protagonist then, with a sly smile on his face, announced that he would arrange a blind date for the man with a beautiful dragoness, and without a second's thought, the man immediately agreed to the proposal. Lloyd was amazed that the man would so easily let strangers into the dragon's lair, but he just stated that pride doesn't help when it comes to dates. The man mentioned that it would have been much more logical to ask him to fight, as he had grown older and much stronger. Lloyd, however, reminded him that dragons were not allowed to interfere in such battles. He recalled the words of the Dragon Queen, who had also stated that dragons could not participate in such fights. The man also noted that the Dragon Queen had actually taken a liking to Lloyd, and he completely understood why. This statement seemed to somewhat surprise the protagonist. The man then added that Lloyd simply could not lose, because then he, Solitas, would be truly upset. Lloyd seemed worried, as he wasn't entirely confident of victory, but he then assured the man that he would definitely be victorious. Xavier curiously looked at the man, then inquired if Lloyd knew other dragonesses. Ignoring him, Lloyd just stated that they had successfully secured the shelter. Xavier assumed that Lloyd intended to fight and win, to which the main hero nonchalantly called winning his hobby. Xavier silently and seriously stared straight ahead. Lloyd, meanwhile, was thinking that he needed to somehow explain the evacuation plan to the residents and was pondering how to do it correctly. At that moment, he saw Baron and said that he was just looking for him to talk. The man reported that the residents had already begun preparing for evacuation, although it was difficult to convince them, as, in the end, every one of them wanted to fight. This news caused Lloyd to stand silently for a moment. He became curious as to how the man knew about this, and it turned out that the angel and the main hero's father had been hard at work. He reported that they had already gathered the most capable fighters, after which all the warriors, with confident looks in their eyes, demanded that their lord give them their orders. Lloyd stood there for a moment. It seemed he was thinking that this turn of events did not suit him at all. He knew that the King of Hell was not targeting these lands. He understood perfectly well that the enemy was targeting only him. He remembered the horrific vision of the future that he did not want to allow to happen. Lloyd believed that these people should not have to suffer and die for him. The protagonist sincerely believed that he alone should fight in this coming battle. Lloyd was about to start dissuading the people, but he was interrupted by Xavier, who loudly declared that the King of Hell only wanted Lloyd. He shocked the protagonist with his words that the King of Hell wanted to capture their lord because he possessed incredible and unique skills. He delivered an incredibly inspiring speech, saying that there was no guarantee they would survive or win. After that, he raised his blade high, saying that if the people were still willing to sacrifice everything to protect their leader, then they should do the same. Literally every person in that place raised their weapon into the air in a unified motion. Xavier shouted the protagonist's name, and the people continued, loudly chanting that Lloyd was their leader. This sight brought a look of genuine surprise to Lloyd's eyes. Meanwhile, the King of Hell, who was observing this, considered all these little people to be true fools for being so ready to simply die. Lloyd sat and watched the burning sun. It was incredibly bright and warm. He continued to just sit, while the King of Hell was writing something on a piece of paper. He sat in his office and worked calmly. One of his men reported that the civilians had already been evacuated. Lloyd stated that it was excellent work and asked his subordinate to also take shelter. The man replied that he was the senior knight of this county and would stay to fight. Lloyd countered that in moments like these, one must remain calm, and besides, who else but him had enough experience to restore these territories after the battle? The man listened to the protagonist's words that if he were to die, it would be his duty to handle the restoration of these lands. Lloyd asked his subordinate to simply leave and hide. The man looked silently at his master for a moment. He stated that a senior knight must protect these lands, then turned to Xavier with the words that he was now the senior knight. He asked him to protect these lands and their people at any cost. People stood near the magic teleportation circle. The dragon assisting them seemed to feel absolutely awful and urged the people to move faster. One girl was very worried about the man. She stated that both he and Kuga were heading into battle. The girl began to cry, as she was worried for the people dear to her. The man was amazed that the girl thought Lloyd would lose, as he couldn't even imagine such an outcome. He asked the girl to consider this merely a short vacation, because they would absolutely win. The group continued to stand by the magic circle, after which the dragon began to use its magic, and the girl instantly began to simply disappear. The next resident was called up, while the fear of the upcoming battle was clearly visible on this man's face. Meanwhile, in the Palace of Angels, our familiar little angel was asking for permission to fight alongside Lloyd, since he was suspended from duty anyway. The archangel believed that his subordinate could be seriously injured in this battle. The angel, however, was confident he could help if he received an angelic ring and hammer, to which the archangel reminded him that he was suspended. The angel suggested that it could be justified by saying that some suspended angel simply stole the ring and hammer from the vault. His boss looked at his subordinate, not knowing what to say to that, and in the end he agreed, pretending that he knew nothing about it. The former demon queen was moving at great speed, after which she immediately stated that she wanted to report some important information to Lloyd. She recounted that not far from this place, she had found a huge number of animal corpses. After that, she added that not a single drop of blood was found in any of the bodies. Lloyd understood that this was definitely the enemy's handiwork, namely that of the madman capable of controlling blood. He couldn't understand why this was done, as the demon had clearly explained to him in the past that the key to the summoning would be the intense fear accumulated in one place. Xavier couldn't figure out how the King of Hell planned to gather fear if it was practically impossible on their lands. Lloyd believed that one could never be certain of such things. He understood that absolutely every one of his subjects had joined the battle as a gesture of goodwill, because, in the end, this was not their problem at all. Lloyd thought it was simply impossible that people would be ready to fight fearlessly for him. Such a thing couldn't happen in a normal world. Xavier was amazed that his master was so sure that all these people were going to fight specifically for him, to which he clarified that the King of Hell was coming for his head. Xavier was amazed by the main hero's narcissism, saying that this was exactly why women avoided him. He stated that everyone in these lands had received so much precisely because of Lloyd. Among these things were clean streets, warm houses with hospitals, a huge number of jobs, and a life without hunger. Xavier declared that the people wanted to protect all of these things. A man pulled back a sheet, then looked at some strange object, to Xavier's words that each of these people was going to fight for themselves. Elves, orcs, demons, humans. They were all completely mentally prepared for the upcoming battle. Finally, the solar eclipse began. The main hero's pet began to eat a seed for enlargement. They were also ready for the upcoming battle. The moon continued to cover the sun, while the King of Hell finally finished writing something. He began to slowly rise to his feet, while Lloyd also mentally prepared himself for this battle. The moon almost completely covered the sun, and the King of Hell himself finally emerged from his office. The angel asked one of the demons if he would go against them if the King of Hell invaded, but the demon stated that the terms offered by Lloyd were much better. The demon added that he would not want to lose such a good job. The sun turned completely black. Lloyd, together with Xavier, readied their weapons. Bloody wings of a huge bird immediately appeared in the sky. That same bastard sorcerer was riding this bird, while on the other side of the cliff, a huge number of blood animals appeared. Lloyd believed that they were not so weak as to be frightened by such pathetic puppets. Looking at the enemy's face, he couldn't understand how the King of Hell intended to gather fear. The loud voice of the psycho was heard. With a crazed expression on his face, he screamed that he had arrived to kill Lloyd. The protagonist couldn't understand why this person couldn't just work as hard to achieve his goals. Lloyd assumed that such fools and psychos could only whine and throw tantrums. This statement caused a moment of shock in the enemy, but a smile slowly began to appear on his face. After which, he immediately began to shout that he had not come to this place to talk. The enemy's beasts immediately rushed into a furious attack. The orcs prepared to meet the enemy, while the elves readied their bows for a powerful volley. Lloyd thought that if they could stop the advent of the King of Hell at this stage, it would be the best possible outcome. He mused that this enemy could easily be pacified with a powerful explosion. The protagonist believed that Xavier could handle the blood beasts on his own. Lloyd saw that not even one of his allies was afraid. This state of affairs made the protagonist nervous, as things couldn't possibly be this easy. The Demon Queen immediately used her special eyes while behind the enemy's back. The opponent reacted too late, and the girl confessed that she had managed to learn all of the opponent's plans. Lloyd eagerly waited for what the girl would say. She began to shout that under no circumstances should they attack the beasts. It turned out they also had feelings and felt fear. The enemy was beside himself with rage, as everything was going against his plan. The girl immediately prepared for battle, after which she successfully managed to grab the crazed opponent. Lloyd immediately ordered Xavier to dig the earth. His subordinate, without a moment's thought, rushed to carry out the order. Xavier plunged his blade into the ground, after which he immediately began to prepare a huge explosion, and a moment later, the earth flew high into the air. A huge pit was created in that spot. The beasts tried to stop so as not to fall in, but it was too late, and they pushed each other, causing them to begin to fall down in droves. Lloyd immediately ordered his pets to deal with these furious beasts, after which they surrounded the pit filled with the blood creatures. The protagonist's pet tried to calm the beasts, saying that they did not intend to harm them. The beasts seemed to understand the intention of Lloyd's pet. Meanwhile, the Demon Queen was engaged in a fierce battle. She threw the enemy's body to the ground with great force. Lloyd stuck his shovel right next to the head of this rotten person. The protagonist stared intently at him. The main hero was curious to see what this bastard would do now. The enemy began to scream that Lloyd had taken everything from him and had to die for it. The main hero, amidst all these crazed screams, confessed that he had never seen such madmen. Lloyd understood that if he simply killed this person, it would all be over. He fell into thought. He didn't understand why. Then, according to the prophecy, either he or Xavier still had to die. The king of hell, meanwhile, calmly watched the eclipsing sun. Lloyd asked the girl to look at the enemy with her blood-red eyes. The king of hell waited with a grim face for what would happen. Lloyd declared to the enemy that he had lost on all fronts. The opponent spat on the ground in anger. He clenched his teeth very tightly. This reaction caused some surprise in the girl. While the enemy screamed that even at the cost of his own life, he would destroy Lloyd. Lloyd didn't understand what was happening. The girl asked for forgiveness, as it was now impossible to stop. The enemy began to glow incredibly brightly. He began to scream, addressing the king of hell, asking him to grant his wish, after which he immediately exploded, leaving behind only a bloodstain. Lloyd couldn't understand what had just happened. The king of hell stood motionless for a moment, after which he began to smile broadly, pleased with what had transpired. The beasts in the pit began to scream, when suddenly one of them simply dissolved back into liquid. Their bodies also began to glow, and in the end, they all began to die off little by little. Lloyd understood that when the summoner died, his beasts also began to perish, feeling incredible fear in the process. All this dark energy began to gather and head towards the sun. Fear, in a dense stream, was concentrating at a single point. Lloyd understood where all this was leading, when suddenly, some ominous skull appeared in the sky. Xavier prepared to attack this thing that was collecting fear. He immediately attacked with his incredible power, but it seemed his energy could not break through to this dark object. Xavier understood that he could not stop this process. An otherworldly voice was heard, stating that this ritual was impossible to stop, no matter how hard a person tried. Lloyd stood silently for a moment. He stared straight ahead, preparing himself for the final battle with the King of Hell himself. The King of Hell began to materialize with the words that he had come to this world to claim Lloyd for himself. A huge thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please write your opinion in the comments. Thank you all, and see you soon.